Chosen one, God is about to shock everyone who thought you were forgotten, but not in the way your pain once imagined. This is not about revenge. This is not about proving people wrong through pride. This is not about waiting for the day when the people who dismissed you finally lower their eyes and admit they were wrong. This is deeper than that. This is about God opening what He has been writing in secret, while everyone else was judging the blank cover of your life. They saw delay and called it failure. They saw silence and called it absence. They saw your hidden season and assumed heaven had moved on. But they did not know every tear was becoming a sentence. Every closed door was becoming protection. Every lonely night was becoming part of a love letter only God could write. You are not hearing this by accident. Something higher has pulled your spirit close, because the part of you that felt abandoned is ready to be healed. God did not forget you. He was forming you. He was covering you. He was preparing a reveal that would not be driven by ego, but by divine timing. And before this season is over, what looked like being overlooked may become the very proof that you were being protected all along. There is a kind of pain that is difficult to explain to people who have never carried a promise in silence. It is not just the pain of being rejected. It is not just the pain of being misunderstood. It is not just the pain of watching people move forward while you are still waiting for one door to open. The deeper pain is wondering if God still sees you, because you can handle people forgetting your name for a season. You can handle not being invited. You can handle being underestimated. You can handle watching someone else receive the applause you quietly hoped for. But when your prayers feel unanswered, when your nights feel long, when your heart keeps asking questions you do not even have the strength to speak out loud, something inside you starts to whisper the question you are almost afraid to ask. Did God forget me too? And I want you to listen carefully. That question does not make you weak. It does not make you faithless. It does not make you ungrateful. It means you have been carrying something heavy for a long time. It means you have been trying to stay strong while a part of you has been aching to be reassured. It means you have been standing in a hidden place, trying to believe that the hidden place still has purpose. And this is why this message had to find you. Because God is not just preparing to reveal something around you. He is preparing to heal something inside you. The shock that is coming is not only for the people who thought your story was over. It is also for the part of you that quietly started believing them. There are people who only saw the outside of your season. They saw you get quiet, and they assumed you had nothing left to say. They saw you pull back, and they assumed you had been defeated. They saw your door close, and they assumed God had removed His hand from your life. They saw your waiting, but they did not see your wrestling. They saw your silence, but they did not hear your prayers. They saw your distance, but they did not know God was separating you from voices that could not go where He was taking you. People can only judge what they can see, but God works in places people cannot access. He works beneath the surface. He works in the hidden room. He works in the quiet obedience nobody claps for. He works in the night you did not give up. He works in the morning you got out of bed even though your spirit felt tired. He works in the moment you chose not to retaliate. He works in the moment you forgave without receiving an apology. He works in the moment you stayed faithful, when you had no visible proof that anything was changing. And that is why you cannot measure your season by the opinions of people who only saw the outside. They were reading the envelope. God was writing the letter. Imagine your life as a sealed envelope in the hands of God. People looked at the outside and assumed it was empty. They saw no announcement, no applause, no sudden breakthrough, no visible proof. So they called you forgotten. They thought nothing was happening because nothing was being displayed. But they never knew what was sealed inside. They never knew the weight of what God was writing. They never knew that some letters are not opened until the exact day they are meant to change everything. And this is the part you need to understand. A love letter from God is not always written in soft moments. Sometimes it is written through protection that feels like rejection. Sometimes it is written through a delay that saves you from arriving too early. Sometimes it is written through a closed door that keeps you from entering a room that would have drained the life out of you. Sometimes it is written through isolation, not because God wants you lonely, but because the noise around you was making it impossible for you to hear what He was forming inside you. You thought the silence meant nothing was being said. But what if the silence was the page? You thought the delay meant nothing was moving. But what if the delay was the ink? You thought the rejection meant you were unwanted. But what if the rejection was God editing the wrong people out of a story they were never meant to control? Chosen one, stay with this message until the end, because there are things you need to receive before you step into what is coming. You will understand why the season that looked like abandonment was actually protection. You will recognize the signs that the hidden letter over your life is starting to open. You will see why God often hides people before He reveals them. You will learn what you must stop doing so you do not drain your strength trying to explain yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. And by the end, you will be guided into a sacred moment where the part of you that felt forgotten can finally release the need to be validated by people and receive the truth that God never stopped seeing you. So do not listen to this casually. Let it meet the place in you that has been tired. Let it speak to the place in you that still wonders why it had to take this long. Let it reach the part of you that has been smiling in public while privately asking God for a sign. Because for many of you entering this season, the sign is not just something outside of you. The sign is what has already begun changing within you. The first sign that this letter is beginning to open is that old environments are starting to feel too small. Places you used to tolerate now feel heavy. Conversations you used to entertain now drain you faster than before. The same drama that once pulled you in now feels strangely empty. You may not even be angry anymore. You may simply feel finished. And that feeling is not coldness. It is not arrogance. It is not you becoming hard. It is your spirit recognizing that the season has changed before your circumstances have caught up. God will often shift your appetite before He shifts your address. He will change what you can tolerate before He changes where He places you. He will make old rooms uncomfortable, not to punish you, but to help you stop building a home in a place that was only meant to be temporary. The second sign is that people who ignored you may suddenly begin watching you again. Not always openly, not always kindly, sometimes from a distance, sometimes through someone else, sometimes with curiosity they do not want to admit. And you need discernment here, because not everyone who returns is a sign to your future. Some people are drawn back because they sense something changing. They may not have language for it, but they feel the shift. They feel the weight returning to your voice. They feel the peace forming around you. They feel that you are no longer begging for a seat at tables that once made you feel small. And when a person stops needing approval, something about them becomes difficult to ignore. The third sign is that your tolerance for confusion is dropping. You do not want half answers anymore. You do not want mixed signals anymore. You do not want relationships that require you to abandon your peace just to keep them alive. You do not want to keep explaining your heart to people who benefit from misunderstanding it. This is not bitterness. This is clarity. There is a difference between shutting your heart down and finally guarding it with wisdom. There is a difference between being cold and being complete. There is a difference between rejecting people and no longer handing them the authority to define your worth. The fourth sign is that your inner life has become louder than your outer life. You may be having stronger dreams. You may feel sudden waves of emotion that seem to come from nowhere. You may wake up with a sense that something is ending, even though nothing visible has changed yet. You may feel tired in a way sleep does not fully fix, not because you are broken, but because transition has a weight. There are seasons where your body processes what your mind has not yet understood. There are seasons where your spirit knows you are crossing over before your calendar can prove it. There are seasons where the old version of you is being released quietly, and the new version has not fully stepped forward yet. That middle place can feel confusing, but it is not meaningless. It is the hallway between what God removed and what God is preparing. The fifth sign is that doors you stopped forcing may begin to move naturally. This is important because the chosen one often spends years trying to push open what was never appointed, while ignoring what God was quietly aligning. You tried to make certain people understand. You tried to make certain opportunities work. You tried to revive what kept draining you. You tried to prove your heart to those who had already decided how they wanted to see you. But now, something is different. You are not chasing the same way. You are not pleading the same way. You are not panicking the same way. And because your hands are no longer gripping the wrong doors, you may finally be able to receive the door God is actually opening. This is why the shock will not come the way your wounded self once wanted it to come. At one point, you may have wanted everyone who hurt you to see you rise and feel regret. You may have wanted the people who dismissed you to watch your blessing and finally understand your value. And there is nothing wrong with admitting that. Pain wants witnesses. Pain wants someone to say, "I see what happened to you." Pain wants the people who laughed to realize they were laughing at someone God had his hand on. But listen to this carefully. If the blessing still needs their reaction in order to feel complete, then the wound is still leading. And God loves you too much to let your next season be built around the people who did not know how to honor your last one. The reveal is not about making them feel small. It is about making you whole. The shock is not that they finally see you. The deeper shock is that you finally stop needing them to. Because when God heals the place that felt forgotten, you do not rise with a heart full of revenge. You rise with a heart that understands. You understand that delay did not destroy you. You understand that rejection redirected you. You understand that silence strengthened you. You understand that being hidden protected something holy until it was mature enough to be revealed. And this is where the letter begins to open wider. Because the question is no longer only, why did they forget me? The deeper question is, what was God forming in me while I felt forgotten? That is where the next part of this message must go. Because what God was building in you during the hidden season is the very thing that will make the coming reveal impossible to explain by ordinary means. They may have thought nothing was happening, but heaven was not inactive. God was training your discernment. God was strengthening your restraint. God was teaching you how to carry weight without needing applause. God was removing false identities that were too small for the person you are becoming. And when the time is right, what was formed in private will begin to speak in public. Not because you forced it, not because you chased it, not because you needed to prove anything, but because God knows how to open a sealed letter at the appointed time. And when He does, the people who thought the envelope was empty may finally realize it was never empty at all. It was sealed. It was sealed because not everything sacred is meant to be exposed while it is still being formed. God does not reveal every seed the moment it enters the ground. He does not uncover every root while it is still learning how to hold weight. He does not announce every person while they are still being shaped for the assignment that will require more strength than applause can ever give. And this is why your hidden season was so misunderstood. People thought you disappeared, but God was covering you. People thought you had nothing happening, but God was building what could not be rushed. People thought you were behind, but God was protecting you from arriving in a place. Your nervous system, your character, your discernment, and your faith were not yet ready to carry. Chosen one of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that visible means valuable. But heaven does not measure value by visibility. Some of the deepest work God does in a person happens before anyone knows what to call them. Before Joseph stood in the palace, he was betrayed by his own brothers. Before he interpreted the dream that would change a nation, he sat in a prison where it looked like his gift had been forgotten. There was no crowd cheering for him there. There was no announcement over his life that made everyone suddenly understand. There was only a man with a promise, trapped in a place that looked nothing like the promise. And if Joseph had judged God by the room he was in, He would have thought God had abandoned him. But the prison was not the end of his story. It was the place where his gift remained alive even when his circumstances looked dead. It was the place where he learned to serve without being celebrated. It was the place where he learned that the gift was not for his ego. It was the place where he learned that when God opens a door, no human system can keep it shut. Joseph looked forgotten until the palace needed exactly what God had placed inside him. And that is a word for you. There are things inside you that have not been honored yet because the room that needs them has not called for them yet. There are gifts in you that have not been recognized yet because God refused to waste them in places that would only consume them. There are answers inside you that will make sense later when the right moment finally pulls them out. You may feel like you are in a place that does not match the promise, but sometimes the place that does not match the promise is still preparing the person who will carry it. David knew this too. Before David was known by a nation, he was overlooked in his own family. When the prophet came looking for the next king, David was not even presented first. He was outside, in the field, tending sheep, hidden, unconsidered, easy to forget. But the field was not wasted. The field taught him how to protect what was vulnerable. The field taught him how to worship when nobody was watching. The field taught him how to face lions and bears before he ever stood before Goliath. The field gave him a private history with God before he had a public assignment before people. And this is why you must stop despising the field. The field is where God teaches you things the stage could never teach you. The field is where your courage is tested without applause. The field is where your character grows without witnesses. The field is where your voice becomes real because it is not performing for approval. The field is where you learn that God's presence is enough before people's recognition ever arrives. Some of you have been angry at the field. You have been angry at the quiet job, angry at the small beginning, angry at the place where nobody seems to notice your effort, angry at the family that did not understand your calling, angry at the years where your life seemed to be moving in circles. But what if the field was not proof that you were forgotten? What if the field was proof that God trusted you with preparation before He trusted you with exposure? Because a person who cannot be faithful in the field will be destroyed by the stage. A person who needs constant praise in private will become addicted to attention in public. A person who has not learned to stand with God alone will eventually bend when people start clapping. So God hid you, not to punish you, not to shame you, not to make you small. He hid you because what He placed inside you needed roots. And roots do not grow in applause. Roots grow in darkness. Roots grow in pressure. Roots grow in places where nobody says your name. Roots grow where the seed must trust the soil before it ever sees the sun. Esther also knew what it meant to be hidden before being revealed. She did not begin in a place that looked powerful. She did not begin with every answer. She did not begin with everyone understanding why she had been positioned where she was. But there came a moment when her hidden placement became public purpose. There came a moment when the quiet preparation became necessary. There came a moment when the very thing she may not have fully understood became the reason others were protected. And that is how God often works. He positions before He explains. He prepares before He announces. He hides before He reveals. He teaches obedience before He releases influence. He lets the story look unfinished long enough for the person inside the story to become strong enough to carry the ending. That is why you cannot curse the hidden years. You may not understand them yet. You may still have questions. You may still carry pain from the people who misread you during that season. But do not call wasted what God may have used as training. Do not call abandonment what may have been protection. Do not call delay what may have been divine timing. Do not call silence empty when God was using it to teach you how to hear. Because the real question is not only, when will God reveal me? The real question is, what has God formed in me while I was hidden? And if you listen closely, you will begin to see it. He formed discernment in you. You do not trust every voice the same way anymore. You do not open your spirit to every person who speaks kindly for a moment. You do not confuse charm with character like you once did. You have learned that some people can smile at you and still drain you. You have learned that some doors can look beautiful and still lead you away from peace. You have learned that not every invitation is alignment. You have learned that access to you must be governed by wisdom, not guilt. This discernment did not come cheaply. It came through disappointment. It came through betrayal. It came through times when you ignored the warning inside you and later understood why it was there. It came through relationships that taught you the difference between love and attachment. It came through rooms where your spirit felt uneasy, even though everything looked fine on the outside. And now you see differently. That is not paranoia. That is maturity. That is not fear. That is wisdom with scars. He also formed restraint in you. There was a time when you would have explained everything. You would have defended yourself until you were exhausted. You would have tried to make people understand your heart. You would have sent the long message. You would have replayed the conversation. You would have opened your wounds in front of people who only wanted more evidence to judge you. But something has changed. You are learning that not every accusation deserves your energy. Not every misunderstanding needs your correction. Not every person who asks for access deserves an explanation. Not every silence is weakness. Sometimes silence is stewardship. Sometimes silence is obedience. Sometimes silence is the way you protect what God is still building. And this is important because the season you are entering cannot be carried by the version of you who needs everyone to understand every move you make. There are places God will take you where explanation will become too expensive. There are doors God will open that will require you to move before everyone agrees. There are instructions God will give you that will not make sense to people who are not assigned to your path. And if you keep stopping to explain every step to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you will drain the strength you need for obedience. So here is the rule for your spirit in this season. Do not explain what God has not finished revealing. Let that sentence sit inside you. Do not explain what God has not finished revealing. If they misunderstood your silence, let God finish the sentence. If they misread your distance, let God reveal the reason in time. If they called your waiting failure, let the fruit speak when the fruit is ready. You do not have to open the sealed letter just because someone is impatient. You do not have to prove there is something inside the envelope. You do not have to hand sacred evidence to people who have already decided they do not believe you. There is a dignity God is restoring in you, a quiet dignity, a holy refusal to beg people to see what God already knows. And this dignity is not pride, it is peace. It is the peace of knowing that your life does not need to be constantly explained to be truly guided. Now, as you hear this, I want you to do something inside your mind. Do not move your body. Do not stop what you are doing. Simply picture a sealed envelope in your hands. On the outside of that envelope is every name people called your season. Delayed, forgotten, rejected, behind, unchosen, too late. Now, in your mind, see yourself handing that envelope back to God. Not because you are giving up on the promise, but because you are giving up the need to open it early. Let your spirit say quietly, God, I will not force open what you are still finishing. That is the hidden season audit. Not a list on paper, not a performance, not something you have to prove to anyone. It is an inner turning. It is the moment where you stop asking only, why did this happen to me? And you begin asking, what did this form in me? What did this remove from me? What did this reveal in me? What did this build through me? What am I no longer willing to carry? What have I learned to obey without applause? Those questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to gather the wisdom from the season that tried to break you. Because pain that is never examined often becomes bitterness. But pain placed in the hands of God can become wisdom. The rejection taught you what access should cost. The delay taught you how to wait without worshipping the timeline. The betrayal taught you that your intuition was not crazy. The silence taught you that God can be present without being loud. The loneliness taught you that your identity cannot depend on constant company. The closed door taught you that not every no is against you. Some no's are heaven protecting the yes that belongs to you. Chosen one. This is why the coming reveal will not only shock them, it may shock you, because you may not realize how much you have changed. You may not realize how much stronger your spirit has become. You may not realize how differently you carry disappointment now. You may not realize how much less you are willing to abandon yourself just to keep peace with people who disturb yours. You may not realize that the old version of you would have chased what the current version of you now has the strength to release. That is formation. That is growth. That is God building a person who can carry blessing without being controlled by it. But there is another part of this that must be spoken with compassion. Some of you are not only afraid that the reveal will never come, you are also afraid that it will. That may sound strange, but your spirit knows what I mean. You have prayed for the door, but part of you fears what happens when it opens. You have asked God to restore you, but part of you wonders if you can handle being seen again. You have desired increase, but part of you is afraid that success will expose every insecurity you have tried to hide. You have asked for the next season, but part of you still feels loyal to the pain of the old one because at least the old pain is familiar. This is called the fear of visibility, and it does not mean you are weak. It means you understand that what is coming has weight. A careless person wants elevation without preparation. A prideful person wants attention without responsibility. An immature person wants the platform without the pruning. But you have been pruned. You have been slowed down. You have been corrected in secret. You have been taught through loss. You have been humbled by seasons where you had no choice but to depend on God. So when a part of you trembles at the thought of being seen, do not condemn that part of you. Speak to it. Tell it, we are not rising for applause. We are rising because obedience requires movement. Tell it, we are not becoming visible to be worshipped. We are becoming visible because what God placed in us is meant to serve. Tell it, we are not leaving humility behind. We are carrying humility with us into the next room. You are allowed to rise without becoming prideful. You are allowed to receive without apologizing for it. You are allowed to be seen without handing your identity to the crowd. You are allowed to outgrow old rooms. You are allowed to outgrow old versions of yourself. You are allowed to protect what God is building in you. You are allowed to stop shrinking just because someone else is uncomfortable with your growth. And you do not owe anyone an apology for becoming who God was forming you to be. This is where many chosen ones get tested right before the shift. They do not get tested only by enemies. They get tested by guilt. They get tested by old attachments. They get tested by the desire to be understood. They get tested by the temptation to return to what is familiar because the new thing feels too unknown. They get tested by the voices that say, "Who do you think you are?" And that question must be answered from a deeper place now. Who do you think you are? You are someone God did not forget. You are someone God corrected because He intended to use you. You are someone God hid because premature exposure would have cost too much. You are someone who survived seasons that could have made you cruel, but somehow your heart is still alive. You are someone who has been misunderstood but not abandoned. You are someone who has been delayed but not denied. You are someone who has been hidden but not erased. And now, the next question rises. If God has been forming you all this time, what must be aligned in you so you can carry what He is about to reveal? Because the spirit can receive a promise, but the mind must be able to hold the pressure of walking into it. The heart can believe God is moving, but if the mind is still trapped in survival, every open door can feel like a threat. This is why some people sabotage the very thing they prayed for, not because they do not want it, but because their inner world has been trained by disappointment to expect loss. They finally receive something good, and immediately they start waiting for it to disappear. They finally feel peace, and their mind starts searching for danger. They finally see a door opening, and old fear whispers, "Do not trust this." That is why clarity matters. Not just spiritual clarity, mental clarity, emotional clarity. The kind of clarity that lets you recognize what God is sending without confusing it with what once hurt you. The kind of clarity that lets you make a decision without drowning in old fear. The kind of clarity that lets you hear instruction without the noise of survival, twisting it into panic. And there is something I will speak about soon, because many people never realize this. Sometimes your spirit is willing, but your mind is tired. Sometimes your calling is alive, but your focus feels buried. Sometimes your prayers are sincere, but your inner frequency has been shaped by years of stress, disappointment, and mental fog. And when that happens, you do not need shame. You need recalibration. You need to come back into the state where your inner life can hear clearly again. There is a frequency of clarity that God designed the human mind to carry. A state where ideas connect, where intuition sharpens, where your spirit feels awake instead of buried under noise, where you can sense the next step without forcing the whole staircase to appear. For some of you, this may explain why the last season felt so heavy. It was not only spiritual warfare. It was not only emotional exhaustion. It was not only people draining you. It was also the weight of living too long in survival mode, where your mind kept bracing for impact, even when God was trying to bring you into peace. And before this message closes, we will come back to that. Because the reveal God is preparing is not just about doors opening around you. It is about you becoming clear enough inside to recognize the door when it opens. But first, you need to understand what the reveal really is. Because the people who thought you were forgotten may be shocked by what God does next. But the deeper shock will not be that they finally see you. The deeper shock will be that you finally see yourself through the eyes of the one who never stopped writing. And when you begin to see yourself through his eyes, the whole meaning of the season changes. You stop looking at the delay as proof that you were denied. You stop looking at the silence as proof that heaven was absent. You stop looking at the people who overlooked you as the final judges of your worth. You stop asking every closed door to explain your identity. You stop letting old rejection become the voice that interprets your future. Because the moment God lets you see yourself the way he has been seeing you, the shock begins quietly, not outside, inside. Before the call comes, something inside you becomes steady. Before the door opens, something inside you stops begging. Before the right people recognize you, something inside you no longer collapses when the wrong people do not. Before the public evidence appears, the private fear begins losing power. That is the first reveal. It is not always dramatic at first. Sometimes it begins as a strange calm in a place that used to trigger you. Sometimes it begins as peace after a conversation that would have once broken you. Sometimes it begins as the ability to release someone without needing them to understand your side. Sometimes it begins as a quiet knowing that says, I do not have to chase what God has not assigned to me. Sometimes it begins as the courage to let an old door close without standing in front of it, begging it to become holy. This is how God often shocks the world. He first makes you unrecognizable to the old patterns that used to control you. The same insult does not reach as deeply. The same silence does not terrify you. The same person cannot pull you back as easily. The same delay does not make you question your entire life. The same loneliness does not convince you that you are unloved. And when the inside changes like that, the outside has to respond in time. For many of you entering this season, the reveal will not come as one single event. It will come as reorganization. God will begin rearranging relationships, purpose, and provision around the person you have become. And the first place you may feel this is in your relationships. Some connections will no longer fit. Not because everyone is evil. Not because you are better than them. Not because God wants you isolated forever, but because access has to change when assignment changes. There are people who were connected to the version of you that over-explained, over-gave, over-apologized, and over-functioned. They knew how to receive from your exhaustion. They knew how to benefit from your guilt. They knew how to call on you when they needed comfort, but disappear when you needed truth. They knew the version of you that would shrink to keep peace. But God has not been forming that version. He has been forming the version of you that can love without losing yourself. The version of you that can forgive without reopening the door. The version of you that can be kind without becoming available to every draining spirit. The version of you that can bless people and still move forward. So when relationships begin shifting, do not panic. You may feel grief. You may feel guilt. You may feel a strange emptiness where old noise used to be. You may wonder if you are being selfish. You may wonder if you have changed too much. But listen carefully. Boundaries are not betrayal. Distance is not hatred. Silence is not cruelty. Growth is not abandonment. Sometimes God has to remove the audience that only knew your pain before He introduces the people who can honor your purpose. And when the right people come, they will not need you to bleed to prove you are real. They will not need you to shrink to make them comfortable. They will not punish you for having peace. They will not be offended by the strength God formed in the wilderness. They will recognize the language of your spirit because they were also formed in hidden places. The second place God may reorganize is your purpose. This is where many chosen ones begin to feel restless. Not restless in a chaotic way, restless in a holy way. The old life still functions, but it no longer fits. The old goals still make sense on paper, but they no longer carry fire. The old path may still be available, but your spirit feels called beyond it. And that can be frightening, because purpose does not always arrive as a full map. Sometimes it arrives as a burden to speak, a burden to create, a burden to heal, a burden to build, a burden to lead, a burden to serve, a burden to become disciplined in an area you used to avoid, a burden to stop hiding behind potential and finally start moving with obedience. God may not show you every step at once. He may only show you the next act of faith. He may only give you one instruction. Make the call, leave the room, start the work, tell the truth, end the cycle, protect the gift, forgive the person, build the thing, prepare in private. Stop waiting for permission from people who were never assigned to authorize you. This is where the reveal becomes serious, because it is one thing to be comforted by the idea that God remembered you. It is another thing to obey like you believe it. The third place God may reorganize is provision. And this does not always mean money falls from the sky. It means God begins aligning resources with assignment. Ideas begin coming. People begin connecting. Opportunities begin appearing in ways you did not force. A door opens through a conversation you almost did not have. A skill you developed in silence suddenly becomes useful. A burden you carried becomes the very area where you can now help others. A seed you planted long ago begins to show life. But here is where you must be careful. When you have lived in lack for a long time, provision can feel suspicious. You can pray for open doors and then distrust the door when it opens. You can ask God for help and then feel unworthy when help arrives. You can desire increase and then sabotage it because your nervous system is more familiar with survival than receiving. That is why God does not only prepare provision, He prepares the receiver. Because if your identity is still rooted in rejection, every blessing will feel like something you have to earn. If your mind is still trained by disappointment, every opportunity will feel like a setup for loss. If your heart is still loyal to old pain, every new door will be tested against old wounds. So before the reveal expands around you, God wants to establish something within you. You must be able to receive without apologizing. You must be able to move without explaining every step. You must be able to steward attention without becoming addicted to it. You must be able to protect peace when old voices return. You must be able to act when God gives the next instruction, even if the entire staircase is not visible. This is not perfection. This is readiness. And readiness is not loud. Readiness is quiet strength. Readiness is the ability to hold blessing without turning it into an idol. Readiness is the ability to be seen without handing the crowd your identity. Readiness is the ability to receive increase without forgetting the field where God trained you. Readiness is the ability to say, God, if you open the door, I will walk through it with humility. Now this is where the deeper truth comes forward. The shock is not only that they will see you, the deeper shock is that you will no longer need them to see you in order to know who you are. There was a time when their recognition felt like justice. There was a time when you wanted them to admit they were wrong. There was a time when you imagined the day they would finally realize that they underestimated someone God had chosen. And maybe some of that will happen. Maybe some people will watch from a distance. Maybe some will wonder how you became so steady. Maybe some will try to return when they sense the favor around you. Maybe some will be confused because the person they dismissed is no longer available to be defined by their dismissal. But that is not the main miracle. The main miracle is that you will not need their reaction to feel restored. You will not need their apology to move forward. You will not need their regret to validate your healing. You will not need their applause to confirm God's hand. You will not need their attention to prove you were remembered. Because when God heals the wound of being forgotten, people's memory loses its power over your identity. And I hear this being placed on my heart for someone listening right now. What they called delay, I called protection. What they called silence, I called formation. What they called failure, I called preparation. What they called forgotten, I called hidden. And what I hid, I never stopped holding. Let that reach the part of you that still trembles when life gets quiet. God did not misplace you. God did not lose track of the promise. God did not forget the tears you never explained. God did not ignore the nights you asked Him to help you keep going. God did not overlook the obedience that nobody celebrated. The letter was still being written, but now, before this message moves into the final blessing, there is something practical that has to be addressed. Because many chosen ones are spiritually hungry, emotionally sensitive, and deeply called. But their minds have been living under pressure for so long that clarity feels distant. You can believe God is moving and still feel mentally foggy. You can have a calling and still struggle to focus. You can sense that something is shifting and still feel like your thoughts are scattered. You can pray with sincerity and still feel like your inner world is full of noise. And there is no shame in that. Long seasons of delay, disappointment, stress, and survival can train the mind to stay guarded. And when the mind is guarded for too long, even good news can feel overwhelming. Even open doors can feel threatening. Even peace can feel unfamiliar. This is why recalibration matters. Not because God is weak. Not because prayer is not enough. Not because your spirit is broken. But because you are human. Your mind, your body, your emotions, and your spirit all carry the weight of what you have survived. And sometimes, as God brings you toward a new season, your inner world needs to be brought out of survival and back into clarity. There is a brainwave state scientists often connect with heightened focus, insight, learning, and intuitive flow. It is called gamma. Some describe it as a state where the mind becomes sharper, where ideas connect more easily, where the fog begins to lift, where the brain is not just reacting, but receiving. And when I learned about this, it made me think of so many chosen ones who say the same thing. When I was younger, I felt more alive. I learned faster. I sensed things more clearly. I had creativity. I had wonder. I had moments where life felt connected. But somewhere along the way, after disappointment, pressure, noise, fear, and survival, that inner brightness felt buried. Not gone, buried. And that is the important word. Buried does not mean dead. It means covered. It means waiting to be reached again. There is a simple 7-minute audio track called the Genius Song that was created around this idea of helping the brain enter that gamma state through brain entrainment. You listen with headphones. You allow the sound technology to guide the brain toward a more focused, awakened rhythm. And I want to be honest with you, this is not a magic wand. This is not a replacement for God. This is not a substitute for prayer, wisdom, discipline, healing, or obedience. But it may be a tool, a small, practical tool for those who feel like their spirit is ready, but their mind has been tired for too long. The way I see it is simple. Imagine your mind like a radio that has been stuck on static after years of stress. The signal is still there. The song is still there. The message is still there. But the static makes it hard to hear. A tool like this does not create your calling. God does that. It does not create your identity. God already wrote that. But it may help quiet some of the static so you can return to the state where clarity becomes easier to receive. There was a story of a teacher in Texas, a woman in her 40s, who spent years helping other people grow, while privately feeling like her own mind was only operating at a fraction of what it used to be. She described it like a machine running at low power, not because she had no gift, not because she lacked purpose, but because something in her felt dulled by years of pressure. After using this 7-minute track consistently, she described ideas beginning to come more naturally again. Decisions she had delayed for a long time started feeling clearer. And what stood out to me was not that her whole life became perfect overnight. That is not the point. What stood out was that she began to feel access again. Access to clarity, access to decision, access to the part of herself that had been buried under noise. And maybe that is what some of you need in this season. Not another complicated practice, not another impossible routine, not another pressure added on top of the pressure you already carry. Just 7 minutes. A quiet recalibration. A way to let your mind stop fighting static long enough to remember what clarity feels like. The original price of the Genius Song is $49, which is already far less than traditional biofeedback sessions or expensive home equipment. But right now, through the link I left for you, it is available for $39. And with it, there are also 4 bonuses included, including an audio track for children, a classic book connected to the kind of thinking that shaped many teachings about success and inner change, a guided visualization, and an infographic with simple habits to help you stay aligned with the future you are building. There is also a money-back guarantee, which matters because trust matters. If you explore it and feel it is not for you, you are not trapped. And I need to say this clearly. There are fake versions and copycat pages online using the name without the real technology or the real bonuses. So if you feel led to look into it, use only the link in the description and the pinned comment. Do not search randomly and hope you find the right one. The link I placed there is the one meant to take you to the official information. Again, this is not pressure. This is not for everyone. But if your spirit has been resonating with the idea that your mind needs to come out of survival and back into clarity, then simply investigate it. Let your discernment lead. And if you feel no pull toward it, receive the message and continue with peace. Because the greater point remains this. God is bringing you into a season where your inner world must agree with what He is opening around you. The old fog cannot lead the new assignment. The old fear cannot interpret the new door. The old wound cannot be allowed to define the new version of you. So now, let this final moment become sacred, not dramatic, not forced, sacred. In your imagination, picture that sealed envelope again, the one people judged from the outside, the one they thought was empty, the one they thought had no announcement, no value, no future, no proof. Now see it resting in the hands of God. And this time, do not try to force it open. Do not grab it. Do not demand the date. Do not ask who will be watching when it opens. Just let it rest there. Let the hands of God hold what your fear kept trying to control. And in your spirit, see your name written across the front. Not the name people called you. Not forgotten. Not rejected. Not too late. Not behind. Not abandoned. Your real name, remembered, covered, prepared, called, beloved. Now imagine the seal beginning to loosen. Not because you forced it. Not because you earned it through panic. Not because you finally convinced people to believe you, but because the appointed time belongs to God. And as the letter opens, the first line does not say, prove them wrong. It says, come back to me. The second line does not say, make them regret it. It says, let me heal what they touched. The third line does not say, chase the room that rejected you. It says, I have prepared a door no rejection can cancel. The fourth line does not say, you were forgotten. It says, you were hidden in my hand. And the final line says, what I wrote over you did not expire in the waiting. Let that settle in the deepest place. The promise did not expire. The calling did not expire. The gift did not expire. The love of God over your life did not expire. People may have forgotten what you carried. God did not. People may have misread your silence. God did not. People may have judged your waiting. God did not. People may have walked away before the reveal. God did not. And now I pray over the hidden place in you. May the wound of being forgotten be healed. May the ache of being overlooked lose its authority. May the old names fall away from your spirit. May every false label placed on your season be removed. May you stop calling yourself what pain called you. May you stop measuring your future by the reactions of people who never saw the full letter. May you receive the peace of knowing that God was present in the chapters nobody understood. May your relationships be reorganized with wisdom. May the people assigned to your future recognize the language God formed in you. May every draining attachment lose its grip. May your purpose become clear, one obedient step at a time. May you stop hiding behind fear and start moving with humility. May provision meet assignment. May the right doors open without you breaking yourself to force them. May your mind come out of fog. May your spirit come out of heaviness. May your heart come out of the agreement that you were abandoned. And may the part of you that still wonders, did God forget me, hear the answer in a way deeper than words. No, He did not forget you. He was writing. He was forming. He was covering. He was preparing. He was holding you in places where people could not see. And I hear this final word for the chosen one who stayed until this moment. Receive what I have written over your life. Not what fear wrote. Not what rejection wrote. Not what delay wrote. Not what betrayal wrote. Not what people wrote when they misunderstood your silence. Receive what I wrote. You are remembered. You are covered. You are prepared. You are called. You are not behind my timing. You are not erased from my plan. You are not abandoned in the hidden place. You are mine. And when I open what I have sealed, no voice that called you forgotten will be able to close it again. Chosen one, if this message reached the place in you that needed confirmation, write this simple declaration in the comments. God did not forget me. Not to perform, not to impress anyone, but to let your own spirit hear you come out of agreement with abandonment. Write it as a marker. Write it as a seal. Write it as a quiet act of faith. God did not forget me. And if you know someone who has been carrying the ache of feeling overlooked, send this to them. Not everyone needs advice tonight. Some people simply need to be reminded that their hidden season is not proof that heaven has left them. And if you feel led to explore the 7-minute recalibration I mentioned, the link is in the description and the pinned comment. Use discernment. Move with peace. Take only the step that feels aligned. But above all, carry this with you. The envelope was not empty. The silence was not wasted. The delay was not denial. The hidden season was not abandonment. God Himself has been writing over your life. And the letter says, I never forgot you.